Section 5 is going the other way from FOIL. It's called factoring, and we're factoring things that look like this. X squared plus bx plus c. The b and the c are just numbers. So I could have like x squared plus 2x plus some other number, 6 or something, I don't know. I'm just making it up, okay? Or it could be like x squared plus x minus 2. There can be minus signs involved as well. This is just what we're looking at. That's what this notation right here means. X squared plus bx plus c. What we will not see is a number in front of the x squared term in this section. Actually, there is a number there. What is that number? It's 1, yeah. So keep that in mind. There's actually a 1 sitting here and here. That's our whole goal, is to be able to factor, to be able to undo the FOIL that got us to here. So we'll wind up with an answer that looks like a FOIL problem. And we're going to figure out how to undo that FOIL to wind up with what we had in the first place. And the answer on this one would actually be plus 2 and negative 1. If I FOIL that back out, I get x squared minus x plus 2x minus 2. And then I combine like terms, x squared plus x minus 2. Exactly what I started with. So not only will you be able to go and undo FOIL to get a FOIL-looking problem as your answer, but you can also check your answer very quickly. And this is a process that you guys are going to have to do in this section. So let me get rid of this stuff, because we don't need it. We need to see this. Back in section 3, we multiplied two binomials together. X plus 3 times x plus 4. Let's go ahead and do that again. What do we get? X squared plus 3x, or 4x plus 3x plus 12. So then my answer would be what? Okay, now what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look at those numbers that we got in our answer. This answer right here. We got a 7 and we got a 12 from our answer. What happened to those numbers in the original problem, the 3 and the 4 here, to get me the 7? We added, yeah. So what did we do to the numbers 3 and 4 to get the middle term? We added them. What did we do to the 3 and the 4 to get the last term? We multiplied them. And that's always the case. No matter what FOIL problem you do, the two numbers that you see are going to add to give you that middle term, and they're going to multiply to give you this last term. That is the pattern. So if you can remember that pattern, then you can undo this problem and write it as a FOIL problem. Because now you know that the two numbers that you're going to need to undo FOIL will multiply together to give you this number. And at the same time, they will add together to give you this number. If you can figure out what two numbers those are, then you have undone this problem and you can write it as a FOIL problem. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing this whole section. So to factor trinomials of this form, x squared plus bx plus c, some number x here plus some number. Find two numbers that multiply together to give you c. That's this number right here, the one that doesn't have the x attached to it. And at the same time, add together to give you b. That's the number with the x attached to it. So it's two numbers that multiply to give you the constant, two numbers that add to give you the linear, or the x term. So, then once you've done that, split the trinomial into two binomials. And what that means is you're going to split it into like a FOIL problem being multiplied together. Once you've done that, you're pretty much done. You just have to place your terms in the correct spots. So let's factor x squared plus 9x plus 20. In my experience, the easier thing to do is look for two numbers that multiply to give you 20 first. Once you start thinking about numbers that multiply to give you 20, as you find those, make them add to give you the middle number, 9 in this case. The reason that I do that is because there's always going to be less numbers that multiply to give you this number than there are numbers that add to give you this number. So that's why I go this route. Okay. Can anybody think of two numbers that multiply to give me 20 but also add to give me 9? Yeah, 5 and 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 plus 5 is 9. So those must be my two numbers that undid, or that I'll use to undo FOIL. So what you do is you make your parentheses like that. All our FOIL problems start off with the variable first term, so that's x, and then just the two numbers that we picked, 4 and 5. I'm not just going to write 4 and 5 though. That's a positive 4, so plus 4, and that's a positive 5, so plus 5. So I'm thinking that x plus 4 times x plus 5 would FOIL out and give me x squared plus 9x plus 20. What should we do to double check to make sure? Yeah, just FOIL it back out. It doesn't take much to do that, so go ahead and do it. We got x times x, which is x squared. We got x times 5, which is 5x. 4 times x, which is 4x. And then 4 times 5, which is 20. And when I combine like terms, will I get what I had in the first place? Yes, I will. X squared plus 9x plus 20 is what you started with, which makes this the correct answer. Let's take a look at the second one. What am I looking for here? That's right. Two numbers that multiply to give me the 8. At the same time, those same two numbers add to give me 6. Can you think of two numbers that do that? Yeah, 2 and 4. So that means I can set up my FOIL looking problem. What goes here? X. What goes here? X. I can actually do that. I can set that up before I even try to factor it. By the way, this is all factoring is. My two numbers that we picked were 2 and 4. And they were both positive, so I'm going to write plus 2 and plus 4. Now what? Well, yeah, that's my answer, but we should check it. So we got x times x, which is x squared, x times 4, which is 4x, 2 times x, which is 2x, and then finally 2 times 4, which is 8. Plus it's more practice for FOIL, which is good. More practice is always a good thing. We combine like terms here and we get x squared plus 6x plus 8, which is what we started with, which means that this answer right here must be correct. Either that or I made a whole bunch of mistakes all in the same problem, which is pretty rare. All right, see if we can do that last one there. So what should I do here? Draw your parentheses. Then what? I can put x and x here, and I can do that without even having to think. Like, I just do that. Okay, now you can think. Two numbers that do what? But what do these numbers need to do? Right, always say this in your head. Two numbers that multiply to give me 24. At the same time, they add to give me positive 11, and those two numbers are 3 and 8. So I can write plus 3 plus 8. Would it matter if I put the 8 here and the 3 here? No. You can multiply in any order you want, and that's what that's going on, is multiplication. So if I put the 8 here and the 3 here, it makes no difference. It's the same answer. When I'm grading your stuff, I'll be able to know that that's the same answer. I'm not going to mark you wrong, even if it's not exactly what the book has. So what should we do next? Yeah, you want to check your answer. This is the answer right here. We don't have to FOIL it back out, but we want to check our answer. So we're going to have x squared plus 8x plus 3x plus 24. And then x squared plus 11x plus 24. So we did get the exact same answer, which means that is the correct answer. All right, we have a bunch of example problems here. There's 4 more that we're going to do, and then we're going to move on to make things a little bit more challenging for you. So what I'd like you to do is work with the person who you're sitting next to and see if you can come up with all 4 of these. And if somebody thinks it should be something different, talk it out. A couple of these are maybe kind of tricky. Go ahead. For this first one, stop. What do we get? So again, because I'm factoring this, I can set it up like a FOIL problem. I can put my variable in that first position like that. And I just need two numbers that multiply to give me 24 and add to give me 14. Those hopefully pop into your head right away. Positive 2 and positive 12. And when you check those, they work. That's the correct answer. How about this one? We're going to factor it, so we're going to make our FOIL problem. We're going to put our variable in there, and now I just got to come up with two numbers that multiply to give me what? 32. And then they got to also do what? Add to give you 12. What two numbers do that? 8 and 4, or 4 and 8, either order. Plus 8, plus 4. And then you should check it, and when you FOIL that together, you wind up with 4 times 8, which is 32, 4 plus 8, which is 12, so that is the correct answer there. Now on this one, I'm going to factor it, so I'm going to draw my parentheses like I've been doing. I'll put my x in both of those positions there. And maybe I don't know what two numbers. They don't pop into my mind because these are kind of weird. You don't normally work with 42, and the two numbers that are going to work, maybe they don't work. Maybe they don't pop right out at you. So what you can do is off to the side, start thinking of numbers that multiply to give you 42. Well, 1 times 42 is 42. Do those two numbers add to give me 17? No. So that one doesn't work. Does 2 go into 42? Yes, because 42 is even. So 2 times what? 21. Do those two numbers add to give me 17? No. All right, does 3 go into 42? And maybe you don't know if 3 goes into 42 or not. But remember the trick I taught you about whether or not something is divisible by 3. If you don't know if the number you're looking at is divisible by 3, what can you do? Add all the digits together. 4 plus 2 is 6. Is 6 divisible by 3? Yes, so therefore 42 is also. So we got to figure out 3 times what gives me 42? And the answer is 14. Do those two numbers add to give me 17? Yes. So off to the side, you can kind of go through this process to give yourself a little advantage to come up with a number that works. So it needs to be plus 3 and plus 14. 3 times 14 gives you the 42. 3 plus the 14 gives you the 17. So that's your correct answer. Now on the fourth one, again, I'm going to factor this thing. The numbers are incredibly small, so you're kind of limited on your choices. I can put my x here and my x here. Do I have any choices?
Yeah. You have one choice.
I have one thing. What is it? 1 and 1. Because 1 times 1 is 1, but 1 plus 1 is 2. So it must be x plus 1 times x plus 1. We can FOIL that back out. We get x squared. Here we get x. Here we get x for a total of 2x. And then here we get 1, which is exactly what we started with. (14 through 19 all). 6 problems. Go ahead. If you look back at all of the problems that we've done so far in this section, they all only had plus signs. They were all positive numbers that we were working with. So now we need to talk about what happens when we're dealing with negative signs. There's only 3 other ways that these types of problems can occur. We had all positives, that's one way. There's 3 others for a total of 4. So if the last term is negative, what does that mean for our factors? Well, the factors are the 2 numbers that we're picking, all right? Now, if this number right here, that last number is negative, what are my 2 numbers that I pick supposed to do to give me this negative 48? I need 2 numbers that do what? Multiply to give me the negative 48. Okay? So my 2 numbers have to multiply to give me negative 48. How can I multiply 2 numbers together to get a negative? It has to be a negative times a positive. Yeah. So the 2 numbers that I pick now, because of this sign right here, one has to be negative and one has to be positive. Not only that, but because of this plus sign here, what are my 2 numbers that I pick supposed to do? to get this middle term. Yeah, they're supposed to add. So now I got one that's a negative sign and one that's a positive sign. And these two numbers got to add to give me a positive 8. So what can I say about those two numbers? One's positive, one's negative, right? So when I put them together, I got to get a positive result. What does that mean for my two numbers? The positive is bigger. The negative is smaller. Yeah, that's it. Okay? So now that I recognize that pattern, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me a negative 48 and add to give me a positive 8. My two numbers have to have different signs, and the bigger number is what? Positive or negative? Positive. So now when I set up my factors, when I undo my FOIL, I can still write my x and my x. But now I know that I need opposite signs. I need one that has a plus and one that has a minus. So I can put the plus and the minus in there. And now all I have to do is figure out the two numbers that make this work. I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 48. Are you going to give me the answer? What is it? Negative 4 and positive 12. The two numbers have to multiply to give me negative 48. 4 and 12 multiply to give me 48, but 12 times negative 4 gives me negative 48. They have to add to give me positive 8. 12 plus negative 4 gives me positive 8. So the two numbers are 12 and negative 4. Do a little bit of thinking here. These three things right here that I'm showing you are actually shortcuts on how to make your life a little bit easier when you're trying to factor these things. You can get to the point where you can do it in your head. You don't have to do any side work or anything. We should always check to make sure that we're doing this correctly. So FOIL it back out. You get x squared minus 4x plus 12x and then minus 48. If I combine like terms, that minus 4x and that plus 12x add to give me the 8. That should be an x right there, by the way. 8x. So I did do this correctly. All right, so summarize on this one. If I see a negative sign on my last term, that means I have to have two numbers that have opposite signs. If that's the case, and I see a plus sign right here, then that means that the positive number has to be the larger number. And that's how I set this up here. I find my two numbers, make the bigger number the positive number, and then FOIL it to check. The second pattern, if the last term is positive and at the same time the middle term is negative, what does that mean for my factors? No, I like the way you're thinking, but that's not the case here. So remember, we have to have two numbers that multiply to give me this number, right? How can that happen? If both numbers are the same sign, you wind up with a positive result when you multiply them, right? But now, if I have two positive numbers that I multiply together, will I ever be able to add those together to get a negative sum here? No. Which means that my two numbers have to both be negative. So that means I can set up my FOIL problem. And I haven't even thought of the numbers yet, but I know that I can set up FOIL, and I know I can put my x's in there, and I know that both of my signs have to be negative. Now all I got to do is make sure I pick the right two numbers. Negative 8 and negative 9. Because 8 times 9 is 72, but negative 8 times negative 9 is also 72. And when I add those two things together, I do get negative 17. So it's negative 8 and negative 9. Little bit of thought here. Okay, FOIL to check. We have x squared minus 9x minus 8x plus 72. The minus 9x and the minus 8x combine to give me that negative 17x. So that is the correct answer. Now the only other way that these terms can exist, we have plus plus in between, we have plus minus in between, we have minus plus. The only one we haven't talked about yet is minus minus. So let's see if you guys can tell me what two things we need to know about these. What's that? There has to be a negative. Are they both negative? Why not? Right, we got to multiply two numbers together to get a negative result, which means that one number is positive and one number is negative. As soon as I know that, I can do this. X plus, X minus. What else do we know? Yeah, the bigger number that you pick has to be the negative one, because when we add them together, we got to add and get a negative result. So whichever two numbers I pick, whatever number is bigger goes here. So let's think now. Two numbers that multiply to give me negative 35 and add to give me negative 2. 5 and 7. That would make me put my 7 here and my 5 here. Does that work? 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. If I FOIL this out, I have x squared minus 7x plus 5x minus 35. Will the negative 7 and the positive 5 combine to give me what I'm looking for? Yeah. So this is the correct answer. All right, so there's 3 patterns here. Obviously, plus, plus, both numbers you're looking for are positive. But if you're dealing with negative signs in between on these signs, then these 3 patterns are the only patterns that you need to be able to come up with the correct way to factor. So make sure you have them. You probably want to write these down. Like I didn't write them down here, but that doesn't mean you don't have to. One's positive, one's negative for sure. The bigger one is positive. Both numbers have to be negative in this case. One's positive, one's negative because of this, and then the bigger one has to be negative here.